One of the best examples of what is meant by perspective is shown within the space section, or actually rather just before the space section, in on page 41. The bottom 5 examples that are shown below, you see the poster of Star Wars and Wolverine, C3PO, etc. These are the perspective examples. And what you're talking about when you mention the word perspective is the concept of depth. So you can create the illusion of depth on a flat two-dimensional surface one of these 5 primary ways. The first of these is to suggest that objects are getting farther away by changing the scale. So the farther something gets away from you, the smaller it gets. So in the top example with the triangles, you have a big triangle close to you, you have a smaller triangle further away from you. And the other thing that you do to create this illusion of depth is you move it up and to the right, or further back on whatever your page is. It can go up and to the right or up and to the left. Overlapping also suggests depth. You have to have 2 different colored objects to do this. They can be the same shape, but they just have to be 2 different colors. And clearly the one in front can't be so large that it completely covers up the one that's behind it. The third one is kind of a composite of what I was talking about with the first, is it's where you position it. This whole idea of the front object being larger, closer to the bottom of the page, the second object being smaller and closer to the top of the page. The fourth option is called atmospheric perspective, and this is also an example that makes use of value. The further something gets away, yes, it's getting smaller, but it's also getting lighter. So the darker object, more contrasty object is in the foreground. The lighter object, imagine mist, it's getting further away from you, it's getting less distinct, you're losing detail, and you're also losing contrast. So it's going to get lighter as it gets further away from you. And the fifth option here is shown in sort of the railroad tracky thing. Because it's moving away from you, it's getting smaller. The space in between is getting smaller. And in this bottom example with linear perspective, they're making use of something that's called a vanishing point, where the objects are actually coming closer together and they're meeting. So the railroad ties get closer together and the actual rails are getting closer together as you move further away. Any one of these 5 ways can be used to demonstrate perspective. And so in Illustrator, if you are where I'm going to show you, but obviously in your world with construction paper, you can do any one of these. And the simplest one is probably the one where it's getting smaller as it gets further away. It's easier if you do it with 3 objects instead of 2, just because it's slightly more straightforward. And let's say I'm going to make mine this red color. I'm going to use the same color throughout. So all of them are going to be the same color. I'm just going to change the size. And obviously I haven't yet changed the size. So let's make it in between. So for my in between shape, I'm going to go to about this. And for my furthest away shape, I'm going to go with something like this. All right, so object moving away. Getting further and further away. You're creating that illusion of depth by positioning them going up or back, whichever. We just have a little bit more diagonal space, and there's an incremental shift. It wouldn't ever go big, not much smaller, tiny. There should be a logical progression, and maybe that one could even be there, and you're saying the same kind of thing. So that's one of my options, where I'm using scale to suggest depth as well as position. So that's really 1 and 3 that I was doing there. To do the value one, you would do something similar to what you did up above, where you would have your darkest one closest and your lightest one further apart, or if you happen to have the photographic access so you can play around with the value chart, the lightest one is going to be the one that's furthest away. And anything in between, and this could actually be the same size and still be saying it, but it's more effective if it's changing both color and size. would be somewhere in between the two. I have a mid-range. So the color's not quite right. It's getting too gray, but you get the sense anyway of bright and dark, a little bit, all right, let's go up. That's gonna be better. A little bit lighter, and we'll go lighter still with the last one, and that one is totally farthest away. Okay, so that's option 2. And then, you could always go railroad tracky if you are so inclined. So any of these give you that sense of depth or perspective, changing potentially one or more of the things. I'm going to do a screen capture of this and move on to the next thing. Okay. So we have, in addition, we've done value, we've done perspective, we've done movement a couple of different ways, we've done dominance, we have balance still to work with, and let's see, what else do we want to do? So it was way back there. So we're looking at 59 for this. So I had to go way back to get at the perspective examples. So, okay, I've done all but balance at this point. So I did dominance, I did perspective, I did movement, I did value, so balance. Okay, for balance, it could be a lot of things. And there's examples in the book of balance. But the idea is that this isn't balanced. It's dominant, right? So how do I achieve balance? Well, again, you're doing your construction paper approach. So to create a balanced equivalent to our larger shape, these are harder to work with because they're so small. Let me make it just a little bit bigger, and this will probably be more consistent and a little easier to cut out. So that's not balanced. But if I do something like this, I get closer to balance. Still not quite there. These shapes are still too small to balance out relative to something the volume of the one on the left, but if you add enough teeny weeny shapes, they will visually balance out the larger one. And so I come up with something that will give the left and the right side of the page approximately the same amount of visual weight. And it may require 3, 4, 5, 6, however many shapes. My spacing is weird, so it's less effective. And this is when I'm all working with the same color. I have to have more of these small pink shapes to balance out the large pink shape on the left because they are sharing that common color. But if I were to work with a bolder, darker, more contrasty, stronger color, I will have to have few of them to balance it out. These have more color and visual impact now. I have to have fewer of the smaller shapes to balance it out. So just keep in mind that it's not all about the shape. It's not even all about the number. It's a composite of the number, the shape, and the dominance of the color as to how you achieve the balance and how you might play around with that. There's other ways of doing it, but it's certainly one of the simpler approaches that can be taken. All right, so if I wanted to do a second balance example, you could change up your shape. You could change up the number that you did. So like the first example I had when I had 9 of these might be my example 1 of balance, and the second one might be what you see here now. It's really up to you to decide exactly which of these that you duplicate and exactly how you go with your example. Look at the book information. Don't just do the video. You need to read this content because, again, these are design foundational things. These are going to come up throughout the DMPT program. They are universal concepts for visual communication, and they're important. So hopefully that helps you get enough ideas of where you're going with your assignment 14. I will post my example pages so that you can see what mine were. And again, Just don't forget, it is 3 pages of stuff for assignment number 14.